Hey, welcome back to the Coin Box. This is the first video in a 6-part series I've made about modern US Mint dies, so be sure and stay tuned for the other videos in this series. The first group of modern US Mint dies are the 1968 S-proof torched dies, that we could also call the GSA dies because of how they were released, but more on that in just a second. I've done my best to condense everything I found about these particular dies, so please bear with me as we jump around a bit to try and piece this story together. First off, a bit of context. If we check out the history of the San Francisco Mint, we'll notice that in 1968 it assumed all proof coin production from the Philadelphia Mint, which means that these dies were the first ever proof dies used at the San Francisco Mint, and they were the first higher denomination dies used there in over a decade. That's important because these factors seem to have played a role in these dies making it out onto the market. This group consists of dies from 1 cent up through 50-cent half-dollar dies, although I've only been able to find this one photo of a half-dollar reverse die, so they must be far scarcer than the other denominations. Something unique about the 1968 S-proof dies is that they were all torched, so the face of the die was basically melted. Some dies were completely melted off, while others were only partially melted, so they retained some of the original details. These dies were not sold directly by the US Mint as canceled dies, but rather sold as scrap through the GSA, or Goods and Services Administration. Does that sound familiar, Morgan Dollar collectors? In piecing this story together, I came across this really cool letter from then Mint Director Mary Brooks, posted by user M. Wallace, with the official story regarding these dies. It reads, in part, that in late 1968, mutilated die bodies remaining from the defacement and destruction of worn or otherwise retired dies at the San Francisco Mint were included in scrap steel sold by the Mint through the GSA at a public sale. A scrap metal dealer purchased it and in turn sold the included dies to a West Coast coin dealer, who in turn sold them to other dealers throughout the US. Some ads in Coin World at the time read, each die was used in the production of the 1968 S proof sets. After the Mint resumed production of proof coins in 1968, the facilities did not include means for destruction of the used dies. As a side note, the Mint closes this letter by saying that since this occurrence, regulations provide that scrap steel remaining from die destruction be delivered under security into a steel melting furnace and there melted. That's interesting because the next group of dies that hit the market in the 90s, the Fred Weinberg dies, seem to contradict that statement, as I believe they were released in a similar fashion to these, but more on that in my last video in the series. So how many of these were released? On this listing I found on eBay, you can see that someone got creative and made a wooden base and plaque for the die. I'm not sure how reliable it is, but it says there were a total of 4,500 dies released, which is the only total I could find anywhere online. Then, going back to the ad in Coin World, they say they had the opportunity to purchase the entire remaining portion, 3,000 pieces, of this famous hoard. So this number seems to support the previous total of 4,500. They go on to say that on the overwhelming majority of these, the detail was completely destroyed. But there are a few of these dies out there that retain some of the original die face. I don't own one of these 1968 dies, but here's a really cool example of a quarter die from Sparky 64, which shows the full date, mint mark, and a bit of the design and inscriptions. You can find links in the description below to all the pages I'm referencing in this video series. Here's another really nice 1968 S-proof nickel die from Bill Jones, which again shows some really nice original details on the face of the die. So how much are these worth? Well, a lot depends on how much, if any, of the original die face is still visible. The more you can see, the more you can expect to pay. Some NGC encapsulated 1 cent, 5 cent, and 25 cent dies sold at auction about 3 years ago for an average of $100 each. But all of those were completely defaced, showing none of the original striking surface. So, in conclusion, these 1968 torched dies, although originally sold as scrap metal, became the first large group of modern US Mint dies to hit the market. In my next video, we'll talk about the 1995-96 Olympic dies, which I think are the coolest modern US Mint dies currently available, so stay tuned for that video. Let me know your thoughts on these 1968 torched dies in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and share it with a numismatic friend. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.